You're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Boy, oh boy. So much to say about this fight, I don't know where to start. Jim Lampley is a major bias-ass distraction in this sport. Before I open up on Jim Lampley, let me go ahead and get everyone caught up just in case you guys don't know. Tim Bradley, he put on an excellent performance. He schooled Dcaf, at least for the most part. You know, I'd say he won at a minimum 8 rounds to 4 or even 9 rounds to 3. There were only really 2 rounds in the whole fight that I felt Chaves won pretty much hands down. Well, really, it was round 11. Then round 12 was a little bit closer, but you could give that round to Dcaf. Now, one thing I will say about Dcaf is actually he did pretty well when he started boxing, as opposed to being the aggressor. He made it a little bit easier for Tim Bradley trying to be the aggressor. So anyway, Tim Bradley, he wins this fight very convincingly. However, the judges, they scored a fight a draw. It was very clear to anyone that watched the fight that Tim Bradley won the fight. Okay? You know, when I watch Tim Bradley perform, the question always pops up in my head. How can any boxing fan dislike Tim Bradley? Casual fan or diehard boxing fan? How can anyone dislike Tim Bradley with the passion that he has, the determination that he has when he is in that square circle, right? That is the question. I mean, you would truly think the way these casual fans talk, how they like action and they like tough blood and guts, damn near willing to die in the ring on some Rocky Balboa type shit. If you like these things, how could you possibly say, I don't like Tim Bradley? Or how could you possibly make comments that suggest that you don't like Tim Bradley? Well, surprisingly enough, there are a lot of people who don't like Tim Bradley. Let's call it a coincidence, because Tim Bradley is on the coincidental list. But Jim Lampley, he happens to be one of those people that basically leads the charge of other fans that don't like Tim Bradley as well. Now, what's interesting is Max Kellerman, he said, we thought that Tim Bradley won the fight. He says we thought Tim Bradley won the fight. But Jim Lampley, on the other hand, he says, now the first fight, Herrera versus Benavidez, that was outrageous. Oh, but the Bradley versus Chaves fight, I don't think anyone would consider that a robbery, right? What's so funny about this is I remember Bradley versus Pacquiao. Jim Lampley, he was jumping out of his seat going crazy, saying that this is the worst decision of all time, right? Like the fight wasn't even close. But then he turns around and he says, oh, I wouldn't even call this a robbery. I wouldn't even call it a robbery. Now, also something I think people should keep in mind. Bradley is on paper as being the only fighter that I know in the history in the sport of boxing where he was granted a quote-unquote gift decision, and boxing fans took it so personal to where they start calling up his family and sending racial death threats. Now that Benavidez got a gift decision over Herrera, I wonder if he's going to get those same death threat calls from those same fans that were calling up Bradley. Probably not likely, right? Another thing I've been noticing about Jim Lampley is when Herrera and Benavidez fought, he said at the end of the fight, like I've heard him say this before for certain fighters, I can't wait to see both of these fighters fight again. Now, Tim Bradley, the guy who always has a lack of power, he comes out in the Dcaf fight. He does a little bit of boxing, but then he turns it up And he goes right back into being the aggressor, like we often see Tim Bradley do, right? He's the aggressor. He has Diego Chaves holding, right? Vicious body punches, vicious combinations, beautiful hooks, so on and so forth. Very aggressive Tim Bradley is in this fight. Once again, Tim Bradley, he's backing up the power puncher. He's forcing him to hold and grab every now and then. But yet, we don't get I can't wait to see Tim Bradley fight again. I can't wait to see these fighters fight again. We didn't even hear Jim Lampley say this in the Bradley versus Provodnikov fight. Same thing happened with the Golovkin versus Rubio card. Nicholas Walters, he gets knocked down, which according to these casual fans, that's supposed to be exciting and so on and so forth, dramatic and, all this other stuff they say. So Walters gets knocked down by a power puncher, Nonito Donaire, comes back, walks down Donaire, knocks him out for the first time. Donaire has never been knocked down. He has never been knocked out. Very dominant performance by Nicholas Walters, right? Never do we get I can't wait to see this guy fight again. Never do we get it. But Gigi, he fights against Rubio right after Nicholas Walters fights, and we get that same comment. I can't wait to see him fight. I don't care who he fights. I don't care who he fights. I can't wait to watch him again. At least he's being honest on what he really is all about. And if not praising fighters that are on the coincidental list wasn't bad enough, Jim Lampley goes even further, adding insult to injury. Like at the end of the fight, Jim Lampley talks about Tim Bradley having an unusual style, which is not always pleasing to fans. And then the other one that I like that these casual fans, they're starting to mention a lot, which is also something that Jim Lampley pretty much started, threw the red meat out to them and they all eating it. But Jim Lampley, he said through the fight, you take a guy like Tim Bradley and look at all those muscles he has, but then you look at a skinny guy like Andy Lee, who doesn't have those muscles, and he gets a knockout. So in other words, he's pretty much saying, yeah, Tim Bradley, you think you're all bad and shit because you got all those damn muscles, but you can't knock nobody out, can you? That's pretty much what he's saying, right? It just seems that he has a very personal disdain for these fighters that are on this coincidental list. Tim Bradley, Floyd Mayweather, Andre Ward, Guillermo Rigo, Terrence Crawford, and whoever else gets added on to that list, right? And unfortunately, a lot of fans in the sport of boxing, they share Jim Lampley's sentiments. There's a guy out here in Vegas, and I'm not going to say his name, obviously, but he's a boxing trainer. And coincidentally, he dislikes everyone on my coincidental list as well, right? All the fighters that I just mentioned and more. But what's so interesting is these type of fans, they always try to use the excuse, oh man, I don't like so-and-so because he's boring, he's this and he's that. But what happens when there's a fighter like Tim Bradley, who's action-packed, who's, there's always going to be some drama involved in the fight? What do you say about that type of fighter, right? So I remember this guy that I know who always discredits everyone on the coincidental list and, saying they're boring, they're this, right? So when Bradley fought Provodnikov, I came back and I asked him, I said, oh man, so I know you love that fight, right? And then this dude was upset. He was like, oh man, but he lost that fight. He looked terrible. He was wobbling all over the place. He was punching while he was out of it. And everything was negative, right? And I said to him, I said, wait a minute, man, but that's that Rocky Balboa stuff. I thought that's the stuff that you like. And you could just tell he kind of shook his head. He didn't know what to say. And then he just came out and he said, I don't know, man. I just don't like that guy. I just don't like that guy, Bradley. I just don't like him. That's what he said, right? Why? Why don't you like Bradley? What reason would you dislike this guy? I don't know. I just don't like him. Right? So he can't play the boring card anymore. Right? He can't play that card anymore because now he's getting what he actually wanted to see, and he still doesn't like him. Just like another fighter that's on a coincidental list, Guillermo Rigo. These Dcafs will say he's boring and I don't like him, he's boring. He gets a first round knockout. They ignore that and they still say he's boring. Guillermo Rigo can get 3 more knockouts in a row and they will still say the same thing. Coincidentally, Guillermo Rigo has one of the highest knockout percentages in the sport of boxing. But he's boring. He doesn't get knockouts, so on and so forth. These people are not going by what the facts are. They're not going off of the whole truth. They're going off of their personal emotions. Right? And this is what Jim Lampley is good at doing. You see, the difference from people like Jim Lampley and myself is when we watch boxing fights on HBO, we have no choice but to listen to Jim Lampley. I mean, of course, you could turn down the audio, but if you want to hear the sound effects of the punches and everything else is going on, you're going to turn up the audio. You're going to listen to the audio. Of course, you could stream your video or you could stream the fight. But if you want to watch the fight in high definition, then you're going to watch it on your own TV. So in that aspect, you are forced to watch or listen to Jim Lampley, right? See, when you guys come over here to Dante's Boxing Nation and you listen to me, you don't have to listen to me. There are thousands of people doing post-fight videos, doing reviews, doing predictions and so on and forth, just talking about boxing, right? If you come to my channel, you come to my channel to specifically listen to what Dante has to say. When we tune in to HBO to watch a fight, we're not watching it to listen to what Jim Lampley specifically has to say. Okay? That is the difference. So the point that I'm making is, if you are listening to me, you're listening to me because you know deep down it's the whole truth, regardless if you want to admit it or not. Because you know deep down everything that I say makes sense. And that's what it all really comes down to at the end of the day. What makes sense and what doesn't make sense. What Jim Lampley says, it doesn't make sense. And the more the years go by, the more confident Jim Lampley is becoming with his hypocrisy. I mean, it's getting to the point where he's like as blatant as Fox News, where he doesn't even really try to hide it anymore. I mean, he just puts it out there so clear for everyone to see, right? And you guys have to understand something. I am only talking about Jim Lampley because there are tons of commentators out there. Matter of fact, I told you guys before, I talked to Al Bernstein. And I'll tell you, I had always wanted to ask Al Bernstein this question. So when I met him, I asked him the question. I said, Al, is Jim Lampley the most biased, blow-by-blow announcer you've ever seen before? And he said, I plead the fifth. I can't answer that question, right? So then I got a little clever and I said, well, let me ask you this way. Have you had a lot of people ask you that question? And he said, oh yeah, a whole lot of people have asked me that question, right? And then later on, he said some other stuff that he told me not to ever quote. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. But the only thing I will tell you is Al Bernstein spoke the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Something else I want to touch on. For some of you people who don't understand exactly the meaning of a Dcaf, what does a person have to say to be considered a Dcaf? We already know a Dcaf is a dumb, casual-ass fan. So if you're wondering what would a Dcaf say, or what type of message would they post? Well, a Dcaf is a type of person who hears you talk boxing, and his only response is to either post some racist shit, talk about some gay shit, or something that really has nothing to do with the actual point of the video. He can't articulate himself. He can't come with a rebuttal that makes any sense, or a rebuttal at all. So what he does is he goes on an emotional tirade, right? Fuck you, Dante, so on and so forth. And that's the whole comment. Now, to put it in a better context, imagine two presidential candidates in a debate, right? You have candidate A, he's, talking about the other candidate. Oh man, you've contradicted yourself. 1 minute you're for war, 1 minute you're against war, 1 minute you're for, healthcare, you're against it, and so on and so forth. My record speaks for itself. This dude is breaking it down, right? He goes on for a good 5 minutes just breaking down his resume, as opposed to his opponent's resume, right? And when they give candidate B a chance to respond, his only response is, oh, shut up, man. You talking that gay stuff. You on that gay stuff or whatever this and whatever that. Fuck you, man. Next question, right? That's his only response. He didn't talk about the economy. He didn't talk about health insurance. He didn't defend anything that candidate A said about him. All he did was responded on some emotional shit. So when you see me interviewing some random Filipino guy who's telling you he's a Manny Pacquiao fan, but he believes that Floyd Mayweather is going to beat Manny Pacquiao, and breaks it down and explains why, and you still have some damn idiot sending me a message saying, hey Dante, well, since that random guy said that Mayweather was going to win, is he considered a Dcaf? No, dumbass, you a damn Dcaf, because he broke the shit down. You just sent some silly ass shit that didn't make sense. I'll leave you guys with this. Some of these ignorant ass fans are decafs, and some of these decafs look just like you. I'm on to the next one.